What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we have more New World news. Now, they have really ramped up their news releases, so today we're talking character progression. Now, what is character progression, right? What does that all entail? Well, that entails your core attributes, that entails trade skills, and that entails weapon masteries. So, whereas our last video is talking about items like gear, things like that, this is talking about how your character is going to grow within New World. What are you going to be able to do? What are you going to be able to craft? And what masteries are you going to be able to go into on your weapons, which are pretty neat. So let's go ahead, let's break this thing down. Now, before I get into this, guys, I do want to say I'm sorry for showing similar gameplay. I'm trying to kind of chop it up to make it a little bit different each time, but there just isn't a ton of gameplay out there. Hopefully we'll know more with the PC gaming show coming up this weekend, but for now, this is what we're dealing with. So let's go ahead and let's get things started with our core attributes. When you begin the game, you create your first character, you're gonna have 5 points in each of the core attributes. You cannot drop below that 5-point minimum, so you will have at least 5 points in each one. Every time you're leveled up, you gain an attribute point to spend on whichever one you would like. Gains from attributes are soft capped at 60 points. You can go beyond the soft cap with the help of trinkets, but there are diminishing returns beyond that point. And if you ever want to respec, you can do that by paying a small fee. Now, early in the game, you can actually respec for free, so you can kind of tinker around, see exactly what you're looking for, what you want to go into, and what core attribute you want to specialize in. So the core attributes that we're seeing here are strength, dexterity, intelligence, focus, and constitution. Strength governs your power for melee weapons. Heavy melee weapons like the Warhammer, they scale exclusively with strength, while lighter melee weapons like the sword scale primarily on strength, but also gain a slight increase based on your dexterity, which moves into our next stat. Now, dexterity governs your effectiveness with ranged weapons like bows and muskets. These primarily are based on your dexterity, whereas your lighter melee weapons, like we just talked about, sword, also gain from dexterity. Next up, we have intelligence. Now, intelligence improves your power with magical weapons, things like a fire staff, a life staff. Physical weapons that have a magical perk like a flaming sword grow in power based on your intelligence attribute. Now, this is pretty cool because typically if you have a flaming sword, some sort of magic affix on your weapon, it typically stays within its own archetype, right? So if you have a Warhammer that's on fire, you really kind of go into strength because at the end of the day, it's still a Warhammer. But in New World, you have a flaming Warhammer, you can go into strength and intelligence and really almost double dip on your Warhammer's power plus the power of your magical perk, the fire. So really kind of increasing the thing holistically. Kind of a nice little touch. I really like that. Moving next into focus. Focus governs your mana recovery rate and your skill cooldowns. So with a higher focus, the more often you can pop your cooldowns, but you can also cast those spells more regularly and just keep slinging those spells out. So if you're looking to be a mage, obviously intelligence and focus is where you want to spend those points. Last up, we have constitution. This is your overall health pool. This has not changed much going through pretty much every RPG ever. The higher your constitution, the more damage you can take before dying. So health, constitution, they're the same thing. So kind of taking these core attributes into account, I think they cover pretty much everything across the spectrum. If you want to go straight into melee, strength and dexterity. If you want to capitalize on your magical perks, on your weapons, intelligence, plus whatever else you want, like dexterity or strength. If you want to go into a mage, intelligence and focus. If you want to go into a tank, constitution and strength. Maybe a little dexterity in there because sword and board type of action, but that's really what we have right now. I think it's simple. I think it gets to the point, but once again, we really need to see it in practice before we can make any determinations as to whether or not these core attributes are solid. Next up is trade skills. Now, trade skills are your non-combat skills. So these are things like gathering, refining, and crafting. From a gathering perspective, gathering skills are your mining, skinning, and logging and harvesting. Refining skills are things like smelting, stone cutting, woodworking, tanning, and weaving. And your crafting skills, weaponsmithing, armoring, jewel crafting, engineering, arcana, cooking, and furnishing. So we're going to break all of these things down, but for those of you who don't know, Crafting, gathering, and refining are big in New World. This is how you do quite a few things in the game. You're going to have to craft your weapons. You're going to have to create things you can use either in combat or out of combat. So there's quite a bit of importance placed on all of these, so you really can't just ignore them. So diving directly into crafting skills, I think these are going to be the ones that people care most about. Weaponsmiths create weapons, armors create soft and hard armors, jewel crafters create trinkets, engineers create ranged weapons and ammunition, arcanists craft potions, tinctures, and magical weapons, cooks make meals, and furnitures craft furniture and storage. So leveling a crafting skill will unlock more recipes and more powerful versions of those recipes, along with some of the other things that they're going to go over in more detail in a specific crafting article. So right now, all we know is these are things you're going to have to continuously work on to build up. That way you can create higher and higher and higher level items, whether it's refining them, gathering them, or crafting them. So I like the system so far, but once again, we need more information. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of the biggie, is weapon masteries. So we got our first screenshot of weapon masteries and what exactly this means when it comes to combat within New World and progression within New World. So every weapon in the game is going to have 2 skill trees, and each skill tree has active abilities, passive modifiers, and then bonuses that are exclusive to that weapon. Now, you're not going to be able to get enough points to spend and unlock both trees, so you're going to have to either choose a side and commit to that side, or be a hybrid of both and not get all the way to the bottom of the tree. So not really a surprise, but as you use weapons, you build experience for that weapon. Once that weapon levels up, you gain a skill point. You use these skill points to unlock the active abilities, passive abilities, and bonuses. And once again, you can respec for free early on, and it'll cost something called Azoth as you get more into the game and once you pass a certain threshold. They're going to dive deeper into weapon masteries in the future, but they wanted to say this: however you choose to fight, you'll need to forge and discover powerful weapons to fit your combat style, whether battling in wars with other players or holding back waves of the corrupted, their PvE side. Your combat skills will mean the difference between life and death. Wow, powerful statement. So all in all, guys, I think this is kind of an interesting thing. If we take a step back and we look at all of your progression is tied to your weaponry, right? You do have your core attributes, you have your trade skills, those are tied to your actual character. But in terms of your skills and your abilities, they're tied to your weaponry. So if you have a throwing axe and you put all of your points into that, and then you switch to a sword and you have a completely different setup, then you can kind of swap back and forth between 2 different play styles, which I think a lot of people will really, really like. On the other hand, Guild Wars 2 did this exact same thing, and a lot of people really struggled because at first it's fun. It's something interesting. You know, you have some abilities. They're all tied to that specific weapon's identity. You know, for the throwing axe, I'm imagining a bunch of throwing style skills and ranged, mid-range to close combat style skills. Well, how fun are those skills going to be after you've used that weapon for 60 levels? How fun is it going to be when you get a legendary version of a throwing axe and it uses the exact same skills that your common throwing axe you started the game with? So really what I'm trying to say is those are going to be some pitfalls that they're going to have to avoid. They're going to have to put something in the game that's going to either take focus off of the limited set of abilities and skills that you have tied to each weapon, or they're going to have to put in enough weapons to give so much variety that you really don't notice you're using the exact same skills over and over. So I want to hear from you guys. We finally have character progression. We're talking about it. We're looking about it. Do you think weapon masteries as character progression is the right move? Do you think this is something that might come back to bite them? And do you think there should be any other core attributes that are added in? Remember, we have strength, dexterity, intelligence, focus, and constitution. Would you like to see some different ones in there? I want to hear from you guys. As always, this has been Vulkan. Thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you next time.